in order to safeguard the safety and the welfare of donkeys. Now, it's a very interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to hear what they have to say about the welfare and what needs to be done in this country in order to secure the welfare of donkeys. Joining me here at the studio are Dr. Samantha Opere. She's a veterinarian officer and project manager of Kenya Network for Dissemination of Agricultural Technologies, as well as Wachira Kariuki, who's the Director of Policy and Public Affairs and Africa Network for Animal Welfare. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Okay, Mashujaa Day, donkeys, this is the work you do. There must be some importance to that. Now, I'll start with you, Dr. Samantha Opere. Explain to us why we need to be focusing on the welfare of donkeys and why you're so passionate about this.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Why we're passionate about donkeys.
Go ahead.
So donkeys are what we'd consider forgotten livestock, because most of the time when you look at anything related to livestock, the donkeys are not usually featured. But donkeys contribute a great deal to the socio-economic well-being of different people. We have donkeys that are working in urban areas, supporting youth, giving them a source of income. We have donkeys that are working in arid areas with women, helping them carry water. And these, they're really contributing to like about 11 sustainable development goals. So donkeys they're very gentle animals, they are sentient, they have feelings, and we feel that we need to highlight their welfare because they do so much for us, and they are our silent, invisible heroes and workers.
Right. Now, Wachira Kariuki, explain to us in your view why donkeys are important. She's pointed out that in the absence of certain forms of infrastructure, donkeys always bear the burden. In Kenya, we don't use horses or anything else, or camels. Largely, we focus or rather depend on donkeys. Why is it important that we actually pay attention to their welfare?
Well, you cannot just single out donkeys without looking at the general welfare of all animals. And so for us, we speak on the welfare generally of animals. And the reason why we do speak about the welfare of animals is because it has an interplay between ourselves, our health, environmental protection, and even the way life within ourselves in terms of health comes. But when we single specifically on donkeys, we need to understand the critical role that donkeys do play within our economy and within our social and cultural aspects. And so it is important for us to think about them. And we want to think about them from the way they are maintained, the way they are handled, the way their life is taken care of, and even to ask ourselves, are we doing the best? And the reason why we want to do our best in terms of taking care of them is because the moral of our society can always be measured by the way they treat their animals. And so if we are treating our animals in a way that beneath us, then it becomes not what our society should be. And that's why it is important that we see it. Where do we see it? We see donkey in terms of gender empowerment in some areas, where if we take away the donkeys, then what you do is you put the load on the women. And that means that they take more time and they have less time even to raise their own families. So it has a cultural and economic and social connection that needs to be brought to fore so that people can understand that it's not just an animal, but it has a part that it's playing within our economy, within our social and cultural perspective.
Right. And every time we have advocacy groups championing the rights of animals and donkeys in this particular conversation, then that means that there's something that we are failing at. There are certain challenges that donkeys are facing despite being as important as you have both pointed out. Explain to us, Dr. Opere, what are we doing wrong when it comes to the welfare of donkeys?
First of all, there's limited awareness in general on animal welfare. There's a slight difference between animal rights and animal welfare, where welfare means that we can use animals for our own intents and purposes in terms of food production or for work, where rights would mean that we are not using animals at all and we leave them be. So for donkey welfare, there was limited information at the beginning on how to handle the donkey, how to use it while working, how to manage its wounds, what sort of diseases it might have. So the first thing that we were missing was knowledge on how to care for the donkeys. So we've been working towards empowering communities to know how to take care of their donkeys. We work with service providers as well to train them on how to manage donkeys. As a vet, I graduated without touching a donkey from vet school. So we also take like a high importance in trying to engage with training institutions to have them include some donkey courses, the coursework on donkeys for them to be able to manage donkeys when they leave school. We're also working in terms of policy, because some policies are the ones that cause us not to have the things that we need for the donkey. So we're not looking at the cruelty that is there. There are laws that are in place, but they're not being implemented. So you have donkeys being whipped or being cut maliciously, but then the law is not followed to get the donkey the justice it requires.
Okay, now I'd like to go to Mr. Oshera also to give us his view on the challenges that donkeys face in Kenya. They are beasts of burden, as they have been termed over time, but at the same time they do deserve fair treatment. So in what ways are we failing to balance our act when it comes to them being of service to us, but at the same time not enjoying some of the benefits of common decency?
I think the issue of donkeys must be seen, as I said earlier, from the bigger perspective of animal issues and animal welfare. And many of us don't think that animals have feelings and they are sentient. And so we do not put in place mechanisms that will protect their sentience being. But what we are not doing right with donkeys is that we have lack of awareness of why we need to take care of them. The other thing that we are not doing right, it is trying to balance the interest of many with the interest of a few. And so we find that we want to put them through slaughter, or we want to put them, for some people who have slaughterhouses or who wants to have them slaughtered, and we find that we are not balancing them. And then the other thing is that we haven't looked at them from a sustainability aspect of it. How long are we going to have donkeys? Is the numbers we have enough? Are we giving them enough of treatment that they need? Are the public being made aware of what needs to be done? Are the laws in tandem with the times that we are in? For example, the cruelty law. So there are things that we need to review, we need to look into, and ask ourselves whether that is the way we want to go. We need to ask ourselves, what is animal welfare? What do we need? Do donkeys have enough time to rest? Do they have enough food when they are working for someone? Every time, if you have a car, you have time for it to be serviced or to be looked into, or you put it off so that the engine can cool off. Do we do the same with the donkeys? Are we able to have a mechanism that people who use donkeys or who are not using them are able to say that this donkey will work for this number of hours, I need it to feed at this time, I need it treated and seen by our veterinary doctors? If you ask many people in this country, they will not tell you they have a vet. But if you ask every other person in this country, they will tell you they have animals. That tells you that they do not take care of them from a health point of view. But it is not because they don't want to do it. Some of them is just lack of awareness, which we need to do. We need to lobby governments to put in place budgetary allocations within the county governments, which has the responsibility of animal welfare, to be able to put more money and more men and women on the foot so that the donkeys and other animals can be taken care of from a holistic point.
And since you are the expert on this subject, what are the laws that are set there to protect donkeys and other animals, and do you feel that they are sufficient?
I don't know whether I would say the laws are sufficient, but there are laws, like we have the Anti-Cruelty Act, which we call CAP 360, that talks about how you should not treat a donkey, you shouldn't mistreat it, you shouldn't kill or whip or override. All those things are there. But when you look at the penalties that are there, they're very minimal. Anybody who wants to mistreat animals will still continue doing them and continue having them. But then even if you look at the law itself, it presupposes that cruelty is there. So then that's why we call it anti-cruelty. It is the high time we change this law, not to focus on cruelty, but to focus on the welfare, so that we focus on the welfare and we sanction someone for failing to observe the welfare standard rather than acknowledging that cruelty do exist from an act of parliament.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Opere, could you tell us, in your view, some of the issues? Let's start off with healthcare. We do understand the social economic situations, and particularly when it comes to people who are depending heavily on donkeys, perhaps they don't even have the, let alone knowing, they might know that they need to have a vet or someone to take care of these donkeys, but at the same time, they might not even be able to afford treatment for the donkeys because they can barely afford other forms of transportation. Could you speak to us about those challenges in those aspects? Because sometimes it's not a question of wanting to do it, but a question of can they even do it?
Okay. So first off, when we started with donkeys, there are several myths that surround donkeys, that they are hardy animals, which means they rarely get sick, and when they do get sick, they die. So that was one of the main challenges that we had with perception of the owners in terms of getting their animals treatment. The other thing is people are yet to properly value their donkey. You may go to a household that has a dairy cow and a donkey. The donkey is bringing in feed for the cow and water, and then it takes the milk to the cooperative, and you find that they will call the vet for the cow but not the donkey. So it means they have the ability to get the services that their donkey requires, but they don't value the donkey enough to offer it the services it requires. So what we've been doing is basically highlighting that donkeys do get sick. We teach them the early signs of disease that the donkeys will show, and then we link them to the people we've trained who are able to manage donkey cases. So the ability to pay is there. The willingness to actually pay for the service that is being rendered. We also help them work in terms of forming groups and saving some money for the donkey's care. So this means that they are able to put aside something that from the money the donkey earns, there's a little money they can set aside and have it available when the donkey needs to be dewormed or to be treated. So it's basically changing perceptions and their attitude towards the donkey, increasing their knowledge and awareness on the value that the donkey brings to them as an individual in terms of income, and then teaching them to set aside the money that the donkey needs for treatment. And finally, linking them to the people who are able to manage the cases that the donkeys may have.
Right. Now, given that you are a vet and probably the people who own donkeys and may not be doing right by them are watching, could you give us some of these healthcare needs, what they need to look out for, some of the behaviors in the donkey, some of these wounds that you talked about that they need to be watching out for when they're taking care of their donkeys that would actually point to a need to see a vet?
So there's basic preventive care that you give your donkey. One of those is deworming. So deworming should be done ideally every 3 months for the donkeys. There's hoof care. So we call it like donkey manicure or farriery, which is basically trimming the hooves of the donkeys to make sure that they are fit for the donkey to walk. There's also, we look at harnessing in terms of if the harnessing of the cart or the pack is bad, then it means the donkeys will have wounds. So first you need to sort out the harnessing to ensure that it's comfortable for the animal as it works. In the event that your donkey has a wound, it is important that you clean the wound immediately. Ideally, you can use salt in warm water to clean the wound. If you can do iodine to finish off. If the wound is too large, that's when you need to call a veterinarian to come and sort it out. We've had cases where wounds are not cleaned on time, and when they heal, the animal ends up getting tetanus. So if you're able to vaccinate your animal for tetanus, but ideally keeping the wounds clean when they're there is the best option. We also have vaccinations. Sometimes you can do rabies vaccination depending on the area where you are. But ideally that's mainly for the dogs. But if the dogs and the donkeys have a close relationship, then they should also be considered. Finally, nutrition is important. Nutrition is everything for all animals. So ensuring that your animal is feeding the right things